Welcome to A Sight to Behold, a Song to be Heard. This is taking a look here at Revelation chapters 4 and 5. And so today we're going to be looking at Revelation 4, verses 1 through 6. And we'll first of all begin with kind of a contextual reading of Revelation, and we'll end then with the kind of liturgical expressions that arise because of these particular verses and how they draw worshipers into recognizing about God. Revelation 4:1 reads, "After this I looked, and there in heaven a door stood open. And the first voice, which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet, said, 'Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this.'" So a few things that this sentence would probably communicate to the audience. What's being said here is the risen Christ. That's who the first voice is. So we find out about that voice in chapter 1, verses 10 through 11. And so now here the risen Christ is inviting the seer, John, into a kind of heavenly journey to really see what most people in John's day are not seeing. So as kind of a reminder, the book of Revelation was written probably sometime in the 80s or 90s of the first century. And for Christians, there were experiences of tensions that some Christians were beginning to have with the state. And the book of Revelation is really a call for resistance, to not capitulate to the pressures of the empire. In particular, there's an encouragement to stay faithful to Christ as the Lord, maybe not to recognize that the ultimate Lord is the emperor, but instead it is Christ. And that means that Christians will have to abstain from certain behaviors that would be characterized or be seen as kind of patriotic. And if Christians are not involved in emperor cult, if they are not involved in recognizing that all the emperors are there because the gods ordained it, and that the gods are benefiting humanity and benefiting the world through the government and the power and the strength of the emperors and of the Roman government, then they don't look patriotic. And so that's a hard um, pressure to fight against. And so Revelation is trying to encourage people to remain faithful and true to Christ, and not to give up what it means to be a Christian when you have these pressures at work. And so in the vision, the seer is invited to kind of come up. Now, so a heavenly journey. So the book of Revelation is an apocalypse, and there were other Jewish apocalypses that were written at this time. And in some of these apocalypses, the seer takes a journey, and they could take a journey through, different levels of heaven. So among some Jews, there were these different levels of heaven. One Jew even had as many as 21 levels of heaven. But we can even see a glimpse of this in the New Testament when Paul in 2 Corinthians talks about being caught up, kind of in a visionary experience, to the third heaven. So here, though, there isn't kind of a going through different levels. We're just brought up into heaven. And what's going to be shown are what must take place after this. Now, the phrase "what must take place after this" is not it's not a pronouncement of future events. It's more a pronouncement of what has to take place in the vision after what you're getting ready to see right now. In other words, what Christ wants the seer to see, what he wants John to see, is the vision that will take place after chapter 6 is finished, after the worship of the Lamb is concluded. So he's invited into this. A door stands open, this kind of invitation into a heavenly world where things are happening. But most people can't see this. The seer is privileged and able to see this. And when you see this vision, it is supposed to reorientate you to how to look at the things around you on a daily basis. So most people look at the world and they see with their eyes things that are happening, and they make judgments and conclusions about, well, this must be real because of what I see. But John is saying, here is a vision of something most people aren't seeing. And once you see this, then you're going to understand what is real, what is ultimately true. Revelation 4, 2 through 3. At once I was in the Spirit, and there in heaven stood a throne, with one seated on the throne. And the one seated there looks like jasper and carnelian, and around the throne is a rainbow that looks like an emerald. So the invitation is made to take a journey. And then the first thing that it says is, at once I was in the Spirit. I'm not really quite sure what in the Spirit is. You see here that I have the word Spirit in a lowercase s. Many translations will have an uppercase s, and that is to make it more explicit that the translators believe that the seer is saying that he was in the Holy Spirit. But it's not really quite sure what this being in the Spirit means. Are we talking about a kind of a mode of transportation? Is the seer on some kind of heavenly scooter kind of going through to get to heaven, and the Spirit is the means of that? Or is it, as others will contend, we're really talking about an ecstatic experience? To be in the Spirit is a description of being in this ecstatic moment where one is having a visionary experience, which makes it kind of odd because you had already this invitation to come. He sees a heaven opened. Well, that sounds like a visionary experience, but maybe once I was in the Spirit is kind of the idea of intensifying the visionary experience. The ecstatic experience is being intensified. So he has one kind of vision, and now he's brought it into a greater kind of vision, and the greater vision has a greater scene. So one scene is just the door opening, heaven opening. The language of heaven opening is apocalyptic. It's visionary. So that's why when Jesus is baptized, he comes out of the water and heaven is opened, and he sees. And what does he see? He sees the Spirit descending like a dove. That is, the descent is like a dove. He's not seeing a dove. And he's hearing a voice. So Jesus, after his baptism, is having a visionary experience. It's not as if people on the banks of the Jordan all of a sudden sees a bird come down and all of a sudden begins to hear a voice. That's not what's being told. We're told that Jesus hears a conversation, a heavenly conversation. This is my beloved Son, God's declaration of Jesus' identity. So here, the seer has had a visionary experience. Heaven has been opened. He is in the Spirit. He's having this thing being shown to him. And there in heaven stood a throne. The throne image is common in Scripture for God's power and God's authority. And so most Jewish Christians, when they hear this idea of a throne in heaven, knows from many places in both biblical texts and non-biblical Jewish texts that we are talking about God. And since you are talking about God, there are certain limitations that are placed upon you. And one of the limitations is you don't really have a description of what is sitting on the throne. You don't get much a description of, looks like a male, or, it looked like this type of person, or this person was tall, this person had, long white hair, or, we don't have any physical descriptions besides these things with that's having to do with color. These brilliant colors are there. And so these colors of jasper. Now, jasper can convey lots of different types of colors. In some cases, it's kind of translucent. It can be a yellowish. It can be reddish. It can be, you know, these different shades of colors, kind of a greenish color as well. Carnelian is red, and emerald is green. So these colors that are there to give this kind of majestic scene, brilliant scene, beautiful scene, as well the idea of a rainbow. Maybe the rainbow conveys something of God's covenant character when with Noah and the rainbow, and not going to destroy the world with a flood, but nevertheless there is still going to be judgment that is going to be carried out upon the earth. So the idea of someone is seated. And so even the idea of being seated suggests something. Is being seated a good thing or a bad thing? Is being seated indicating action or non-action? So, we might take a seat to mean, take it easy. Or someone might say, please take a seat because I'm getting ready to, ask you some questions. So it's not clear if the seating on the throne is supposed to let you know, okay, an announcement is getting ready to be made, or is seating on the throne is, God is watching. He's just sitting, he's observing, he's not acting yet. It is a vision then of sitting, and it is a vision of colors, but there is no vision of a body, and that's appropriate because when you're talking about God, you're not supposed to provide an image that can be attached to God. So the colors radiate something that is splendor and majesty and wonder. Then chapter 4, verse 4, around the throne are 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones are 24 elders, dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their heads. So the throne is not alone. There are other thrones around them, and we meet again here elders. Whoever the elders are, some have suggested maybe they are the heavenly counterpart of human beings. So the number 12, since there are 12 tribes of Israel, 12 representing Jews, and another 12 representing, non-Jews. And together the 24 make up all of humanity. Or, the 24 may be symbolic for rulers. Each powers on earth have a figure in the heavenly realm that represents it. That's why in the book of Daniel you'll have this language of the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece. And then there's really a Prince of Judah, that's Michael. And so these princes live in the celestial world, in this heavenly sphere. And so maybe these 24 are the representation of the world's powers. Or some have thought, well, there are 12 apostles. Maybe it has to do with apostles. And if there are 12 apostles, maybe there are 12 patriarchs. And so that's kind of the collection, as it were, of Old Testament and New Testament figures. We don't know exactly who the elders may represent. In Revelation, they are the worshipers of God, as we will see here shortly, and they are the worshipers of Christ. And there'll be an occasion when one of these 24 elders will interpret what John sees, help them to understand what it is he sees. What is unquestionable, though, about them, even though we may not know their identity, is that their close proximity to God indicates that they are of the most highest honor in the heavenly cosmos. So proximity is an important issue of honor. You think about if you were, say, going to a wedding, and if there is the bride and groom's table, maybe it's a very long table. Well, who gets to sit at that table? That determines a lot of things in different cultures. Who would sit next to the honored couple will indicate something of your, level of honor at that event. Or, maybe in different business settings, there'll be someone who will sit at the head of a table, and who gets to sit closest to that person may indicate something of their honor. Well, these elders get to sit, very close to God. And so they have a high honor, whoever they might represent. And that's important because whether they are humanities or the rulers or apostles or patriarchs, whoever that they are, what these people of the utmost honor from heavenly perspectives have, they themselves are going to know something about where they stand in relationship to God. And then Revelation 4, verses 5, and the first part of 6, and we'll do the second part of verse 6 in another episode. But coming from the throne are flashes of lightning, and rumblings, and peals of thunder. And in front of the throne burn 7 flaming torches, which are the 7 spirits of God. And in front of the throne, there's something like a sea of glass, like crystal. Well, here, remember, the throne is God, and so the lightnings and thunder, these are oftentimes associated with what we call theophanies. Theophanies are things that a physical manifestation of the nearness of God. So a burning bush, you're close to God. An earthquake, something with indicate some kind of divine action that is getting ready to happen. So lightnings and thunder are associated with the activity of God. And so here the throne has this actions that are going on, and these actions are supposed to remind all who they are in front of, or who they are around, who they are in close proximity to. Going back to that idea of proximity, being close to someone might indicate a familiarity with that person. So if you are physically sitting close to somebody, that may suggest that you share an intimacy with one another. That's why, maybe on in certain situations, we might not intentionally, if we don't have to, sit close to a stranger, not unless we're forced to, like on a plane or on a bus. But if you are close to someone, this intimacy can also breed a sense of too much familiarity. You can take advantage, or you can minimize who it is that you are sitting next to, who you are physically close to. So the elders are close to God, have that proximity around his throne, and yet the flashes of lightning, the rumbles, the peals of thunder that surrounds all this is a reminder, no matter how close you are, you've got to remember who it is that you are in front of. And what we have in front of the throne are seven flaming torches, which is explained as the seven spirits of God. So the thunder and lightning is all about kind of God's revelation. God does reveal himself. Um, and with this manifestations at times, Exodus 19, when God manifests himself, it can be with something like flames or fire. And God even reveals himself in a storm. So lightnings and thunder oftentimes suggest storms. So all of this, these events are reminding us that we are approaching someone who reveals himself. Who the seven spirits of God are, they've already been introduced earlier on in the book of Revelation. Still, we don't know their identity. Maybe some connect it with Isaiah 11:2, which represents the different spirits of God that is given to a kind of a messianic character. Others make an association with Zechariah's menorah, a seven candled with seven flames on them, so 7 times 7, 49 flames. So maybe it's connected with that, or there may be some other kind of symbolic reference here with the seven spirits and who they might be. In all of this, they're before God, but also what's before God is this sea of glass. And so we talked about the storm a few minutes ago. Something else about the sea. Judeans, or many Jews, are not typically seafaring people. So there may be a coast somewhere near, but they're not the type of people that build ships and go out into ships and do sailing stuff. The sea. Now you may have people who are on the Sea of Galilee who fish for food, but you don't have people who are going off on big sea voyages. The sea and any big giant body of water are oftentimes associated with demonic activities. Evil spirits can come up from the sea. The sea is a dangerous place. It's a scary place. But here in the heavenly thing is a sea that is made of crystal. It is before God, and God who kind of calms the waters, God who calms the sea. So that this sea is standing before him, and there is nothing frightening about this. Being a sea of glass, crystal, something like crystal, is not unnerving, although the overall image of God in front of you is. So the seer is invited to come and look and see. See this thing that you stand before and get ready, as it were, to have the appropriate response. As far as this, what it does for us liturgically, I hear thunder. I don't know if you ever remember that song, heard that song, I hear thunder, oh, don't you, pitter patter raindrops. So, you hear thunder and you kind of, have anticipation that something is coming. Rain is going to come. But thunder is an interesting sound as well to kind of reflect on. When you hear thunder, some thunder, people like the sound of thunder. It's cool to hear thunder. Others get nervous about hearing thunder. Well, John is bringing readers into a world. And with the thunder, the sound of thunder, they need to be reminded of their place. You are allowed to come near to something. But though you come near to this, you need to be reminded of how great and awesome this person is, this entity is, that you are standing for, that you are getting to see. Even though you can't see a form, you're seeing the things that are reminding you of your place. We sing some songs that I think try to do that in our worship as well. we have a song that saying, "Great is the Lord Almighty." And as we sing that song, it has some words, it has some lyrics that are supposed to remind us once again that we are coming before somebody, uh, you know, different than us, and we have a particular response when we are coming before God. He is Almighty. He is different, and so not only that, but we are also on holy ground. When we sing, we are standing on holy ground. There are angels all around. Let us praise Jesus. So this idea of we're someplace different. We're recognizing who God is, and we should be humbled before Him. We might have a familiarity with God. We can address Him as Father. Jesus can be our friend, but we've got to also remember our place as much as we become and achieve in this life. And we can achieve a great deal in our lives. We can do a lot of things. We can become a lot of things in our lives. Uh, we're not sitting on the throne that John sees. That's somebody else. And we are invited to come, and we're invited to worship the one who sits there on that throne. And this is the throne above all other thrones. And this person sits on this throne throughout all the chaos and the storms of life. In the book of Revelation, there's going to be a lot of pain, there's going to be a lot of suffering, there's going to be a lot of chaos, there's going to be death. But despite all that, despite whatever happens, there is still one on the throne. There's still one who is sovereign. And when we get the chance to see that, this is something most people don't see. And when we're invited to see and recognize the one on the throne, let's just remember who we are. We are the ones who have come to worship that He is mighty, that He is holy. And so that gives us a little bit of more of the sight to behold and a song to be heard.